Okay, guys, welcome back to the fifth key knowledge dot point of Outcome to Marketing. And this one, probably what I'd call the main event of the outcome. This is by far and away the largest key knowledge dot point in terms of the amount of content it needs to cover. You can see it's called the Marketing Mix 7 Ps. If you ever study business marketing at any point in the future, if you even touch on marketing, the 7 Ps is something you're going to come back to. It's kind of one of the fundamental core kind of aspects of marketing that you would always look at in the study of marketing, and all people involved in marketing would be very much aware of this model. So here's where it sits in the study design. You can see there the 7 Ps. Marketing, a model of marketing, and then it tells you what the 7 Ps are. So that's why it's called the 7 Ps, because each element begins with the letter P. So look, I'm going to get through this as quickly as I can, because there's a lot of content. The key for you guys here is to make a really organized set of notes. There's going to be lots of headings, subheadings. Don't just copy down blocks and blocks of text with nothing in between, because it will mean nothing to you, because this is a lot of content. So there's a lot you'll see on the screen. I'm going to talk to it, of course, as usual. I will try to not go into too much detail, but look, I'm going to give you lots of examples as we go as well, to give you to help you out and help you with your marketing report as well. So a lot to get through. Let's get into it. So what's this one all about? So it's called the Marketing Mix of 7 Ps. Now, the 4P marketing mix originated in the 1940s. So their Harvard professor wrote a report and referred to marketers as mixers of ingredients. This idea of the marketing mix then kind of became more solidified through the 1960s. And in the early 80s, extended from the 4 Ps to the 7 Ps, which is kind of where we're still at today. And that's all we're looking at here in this particular key knowledge. So the 7 Ps marketing mix, or the 7 Ps model of marketing, basically refers to a set of actions or tactics, strategies that a company can use to promote its brand or its product in the marketplace. And as I just said before, as the name implies, there's 7 P words, each representing a different action. So what we're going to do in this video is take you through each of those 7 Ps. Now, the first one we look at is product. That's the most lengthy. There's more to that than the others. So once you finish a product, don't sit there thinking, oh my God, I've got 6 more of these, because some of them are shorter. But look, we've got to get through each of them. Let me tell you about how they play out. So starting with product, okay, the first of our 7 Ps. To define it, we're going to use it referring to an item that satisfies consumers' needs or wants. Now, where I'm going to be quite specific here, in past videos, I've said goods and services. I say goods and services a lot, because whenever we're talking about business, you might be selling a good or a service. Here, we're going to talk more just about goods, but that incorporates services as well, okay? So a good is something physical, something tangible you can touch. A service is something intangible that you cannot touch. So that can include services, ideas, events, experiences. So basically, even though in this video we're going to be talking about products, it doesn't necessarily mean something you can physically touch, a tangible good. It could mean any of those things you see there. Now, examples of marketing decisions that are involved in this first P product. You have a little list there. Now, the 4 in red are the ones I'm going to focus on. Like I said, we can't talk about everything related to the 7 Ps, or this video would be many hours long. So we kind of, as always, we narrow things down, simplify things a bit. So we're just going to talk about the first 4 things that you see in the red here. So let's get into the first one. So when we're talking about a product, first consideration, or one of the considerations, is the product design, okay? So, there's marketing involved even in the design of the product. We've got to make sure the product has all the features that are going to enable that product to fulfill its intended purpose in the market. Think about the quality. Okay, quality linking into price, branding, market positioning. Are you kind of focusing on a high-end market or a cheaper kind of part of the market? Is a degree of quality of the product appropriate for what you're trying to achieve in terms of your branding? So, if you're trying to go for like a high-end brand and charge a lot of money for it, obviously the product quality must reflect that. That's not the only way to make money. There's people can make a lot of money by selling something which is much cheaper, but your marketing is going to have to reflect that. And part of marketing, which you see one of the 7 P's, is price. The price would also have to reflect that. Again, we'll talk about that a little bit later. So product design, first consideration when we're talking about our first P, product. Second one, branding. Now, we're introduced to the idea of branding a couple of key knowledge dot points ago. What we're talking about here is creating some kind of memorable business name, maybe a logo that customers will immediately identify with your business. So look at some of the examples you see here on the screen, the Nike tick, the McDonald's golden arches. Even if you saw that logo, the McDonald's one you see there without the McDonald's word, you would immediately know what business that is. And in fact, I'm pretty sure that's been either in the top 1 or 2 most recognized logos on the planet for many, many years now. Even in countries where they don't have McDonald's, in the middle of Africa where there's no chance of ever eating McDonald's, they would still recognize somehow the golden arches. The branding is that powerful. Okay. So branding, very, very important. Hugely influential in marketing. As we've touched on before, the brand of a product can convey a whole range of meanings, attributes, values, and even emotions. Okay. Just a little definition here. The business with the largest share of the market is known as the market leader or the brand leader. Sometimes you might see this term brand leader. That just means that you sell more of your type of product than any of your competitors, essentially. Now, some brands even become powerful enough to become the accepted word in common language for that type of product, or in some cases, the brand even becomes a verb. So if your brand becomes a verb, you're probably doing okay. And I'll give you a few examples here, okay? Now, some of these examples are more kind of UK examples, kind of from where I grew up from. So this one here is one of those. In the UK, you don't do the vacuuming, you do the hoovering. And the reason being, look, I don't think this even applies these days, but certainly when I was a kid, Hoover was the kind of market leading brand of vacuum cleaner. So most people that had a vacuum cleaner had a Hoover and you did the hoovering. But that term became so common that even people that did not have a Hoover branded vacuum cleaner still did the hoovering. And I believe today Hoover has a much, much lower share of the market than it did in those days, but still that word has stuck. It's still you do the hoovering. Even though I reckon very few people now would actually own a Hoover branded product, we still say you're doing the hoovering. Okay, another UK example here. Again, when I was growing up, you didn't use whiteout, as you guys would say. We would use Tipex. Okay, so again, Tipex was the market leading brand, but a lot of people didn't use Tipex. They used generic brands, but you would still refer to it as Tipex and you would Tipex something out. You know what I mean? So again, another example of a brand becoming a verb because that branding was so powerful. Again, in the UK, I'm not actually sure if this one even applies. In Australia, maybe it does, I'm not sure. But you sellotape something together. So again, sellotape is the generic word that we use for the product, even if the sticky tape is not made by sellotape. And again, it became a verb. This one definitely is Australian because this one was new to me when I moved here. In Australia, we use a Band-Aid, even if we're not using that brand of sticky plaster, whatever the generic term for that type of product is. In fact, in the UK, we use the word plaster for that. But yeah, in Australia, we say Band-Aid. But very often, it might not actually be the brand Band-Aid that you're actually using, but you would still call it that. Here's like a whole bunch of others as well. You probably not even aware that some of these are actual brands which have become the generic names. Some of these are kind of uniquely Australian. In fact, if I go to this next screen, an esky, that's a very Australian term, for an ice box or a cool box. And again, a lot of us would have cool boxes or ice boxes at home which are not esky branded or made by esky, but we still refer to them as esky. Another very Australian one is a Sharpie. Okay, in England we have felt tip pens. Here they're called Sharpies, and again it's off a brand. Coming back to this screen, jet ski is a pretty generic one internationally. Jet ski, you refer to any of that type of product as a jet ski, even though jet ski is only one brand that makes that type of watercraft. Okay, jacuzzi, again, hot tub jacuzzi. That's more of an English one, I think. We say jacuzzi, even though most of them are actually not the jacuzzi brand. So you see what I'm saying? Very, very powerful branding. How much does a business actually care about this branding? A huge amount. So go back a few years, BP and Woolworths spent a number of years in court battling each other over the use of the colour green. Okay, Woolworths wanted, you notice the colour green, there's some green in there which is very similar. BP kind of said that they owned it and that Woolworths couldn't use it. They spent years going back and forth in court, and I think there were a few court cases. The culmination of which, in the end, the judge said no, that BP do not own the colour green, Woolworths is entitled to use it, so on and so forth. And a similar thing happened with the colour purple with Cadbury and Darrell Lea. Cadbury said they own the colour purple. Ultimately, a judge said, no, you don't, which meant Darrell Lea could also use the colour purple in their branding as well. But, these companies spent millions and millions of dollars in court battling over this. It just kind of goes to, how much or how important this branding is to them, okay? There's some companies that like to be associated with certain types of events because they perceive that those events reflect the brand image that they're trying to portray. So what you see an example of here is one of the scoreboards at Wimbledon, the Wimbledon Championships. And you can see the Rolex branding on there. Wimbledon is probably the most prestigious of the 4 Grand Slams. I'm actually not sure if Rolex sponsor the other 3 Grand Slams. Maybe they do, because at the end of the day, tennis overall is kind of a prestigious sport. But yeah, today Rolex is present at most of the prestigious type events in sports like golf, sailing, tennis, motorsport, and equestrian. So all those sports that you tend to kind of associate with money, I guess, maybe a bit posher. But, you're not going to see Rolex advertising or sponsoring, AFL or NRL or that type of sport. So the image just doesn't kind of align with what they're portraying themselves to be. The importance of colour in branding. I just mentioned a couple of companies battling over green and purple. But look, colour is a real thing in marketing. Okay, psychologists have stated that 80% of the information that we receive from a logo comes from the colours used within it. Okay, and that's because different colours evoke different feelings and emotions within us. So companies often go to great lengths to make sure that the colour strategy around their logo matches their branding strategy, and it all kind of lines up. Okay, one example of this is Google, that tested 40 different shades of blue in its logo just to see which one performed the best, to a sample range of potential customers. Sounds crazy, but that's kind of the lengths that business will go to. Here's just a few examples of what psychologists say. These are kind of the emotions, the feelings that we associate with colours. Some examples there. I think actually, if you look at that, that kind of makes some sense as well. Certainly the red for warmth and passion, sensuality, and the purple luxury, purity, simplicity, that white. Yeah, so I think this does kind of make sense when you think about it. So look, just some examples. McDonald's, the red and yellow. Now red because it's seen as warming, energizing. It's even thought that red stimulates hunger. Okay. And there's other fast food brands that also incorporate red, which may be the reason for that. The yellow signifies optimism and happiness. And as a combination, obviously the red and yellow really stands out, stands out among the crowd. You can see it from a distance. Subway, green signals health and freshness, which are kind of values at the core of their branding. Again, yellow, happiness, optimism. And again, the yellow and green from a distance, easily visible, draws the eye. Lufthansa, this is the German national airline. Look, this is an interesting one because they use blue, and blue is a commonly used one amongst airlines. Blue is we said before, professionalism, trustworthiness, reliability, which if you think an airline, kind of one of the key values that you would hope that the airline has, that you're going to fly with, so the thing doesn't fall out of the sky. But it's one of the few that uses yellow, which stands again for happiness and optimism. So kind of an interesting mix of colours there. Volkswagen, German car brand, again with the blue. Volkswagen's trying to convey the values that German cars are associated with, so the idea of reliability and consistency, that kind of thing. Whereas another German car brand, Audi, and if you know anything about cars, in the eye of customers, Volkswagen and Audi are seen very differently. So the red script in the logo there is meant to stand for the masculinity of the brand, excitement, passion for driving, that sort of thing. So both German car brands, but both trying to portray something very different through their logos, including through the use of colour. Okay, the third consideration under product. So we're still under product, the first of the 7 Ps, and we're kind of moving through different considerations associated with that. Packaging. Now, the design of the packaging that the product is going to be delivered in or presented to the customer, also very, very important, okay? And also this possibly links back to the branding and the logo as well, because obviously chances are it's going to incorporate that. Now, uses for packaging. There's a bunch of things that packaging is used for. I'm not going to talk through those. That's pretty obvious, but they're kind of the key things that, when you're designing your packaging, you've got to take into account those things. That's what it's trying to do. That's what it's trying to achieve. Just some examples. Okay, so linking branding and logo. So Apple packaging. If you've ever bought Apple products, you realize that the packaging is predominantly white. In fact, it used to be more white. It didn't even used to have pictures of the products on it, as you see here. Now, the front of the boxes tend to have a picture of the product inside. Didn't even use that, just really simple white boxes. And again, what does that signify? Simplicity, professionalism, cleanliness, that sort of thing. And if you think about Apple, that's kind of how their products are. That's what they're trying to portray. It's kind of the image you get when you think of Apple products. Simplicity is kind of the key, yeah? Another one you may or may not be aware of this. This is Tiffany, the jewelry brand, sort of not super high end, but relatively high end, I guess. That color blue, I'd call it turquoise. I'm not sure if you'd call it teal. But if I see that color, immediately my mind goes to Tiffany, because all of their packaging is that same kind of shade of turquoise, if you like, that you see there. So if I see anything, even not Tiffany packaging, but just that color has such strong associations with the Tiffany brand as it would do with people that have bought from Tiffany. Again, just immediately brand association with the color. Consideration 4, okay, positioning. Okay, where does your product or your service stand in relation to the competing products in the market? In the minds of the eyes of consumers. So in other words, are consumers looking at you as a high-end product or a budget product? Okay, so you need to be aware of, in the minds of your potential customers, where you sit in relation to the competition in terms of the positioning. Consideration 5, product mix. Now, the idea is here that many, many businesses offer more than one product for sale, clearly, yeah. Product mix is simply the full range of products that is offered by a particular business, and for some large business, this can be in the thousands. Okay, the product mix is measured in 2 different dimensions. We have the breadth, which is the number of product lines carried, it's a number of different products, and then the depth is kind of what sits behind the number of lines. So in other words, the number of different colors, sizes, models, etc. within each product line. So if you think about the combination of that, it can be absolutely vast. Now, the point here is some businesses have a strategy of offering a huge product mix, and some have a strategy of offering a much smaller product mix or product range. The point is, either can work. Neither of those strategies is the right strategy. They both can work. So here's a little, also like a quiz if you like. So Coca-Cola makes so many different beverages that if you drink one per day, it would take you over how long to try them all? Coca-Cola has a product portfolio of more than how many beverages and how many different brands, spanning from sodas, energy drinks, through to soy-based drinks. Okay, so if we just plug in, think about what you have a guess, kind of what you think. if we plug in some numbers, so basically if you drank one Coca-Cola beverage every day, it would take you over 9 years to try them all, okay? They have a product portfolio of over 3,500 drinks, 500 brands. So in other words, if you took that, I guess that's 500 brands on average. Each brand would have 7 drinks. 5 times 7 to get to 3,500. So you can see this is a huge, huge product mix. So if you think about it from a business perspective, you go back years ago, Coca-Cola really, had essentially Coca-Cola at one point, and then, expanded to, include Diet Coca-Cola and a couple of different flavors of Coca-Cola. But at some point, I guess soft drinks, particularly sugary soft drinks, have kind of fallen out of favor, and, customer preferences have moved towards more healthy options and different types of drinks. So Coca-Cola's business model has reflected that, They haven't started all of these brands, and you see some of them in front of you here. They didn't start them, but what Coca-Cola tend to do is go out and purchase other businesses and then incorporate them within their portfolio. So, if you want a type of drink, any type of drink, the chances are you'll be able to get something of that nature, which is under the Coca-Cola brand. Okay, so huge, huge variety of drinks. It's not just about Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola now would be, I don't know what percentage of their business, but obviously a lot smaller than it would have been 30 or 40 years ago. Just another example of this product mix idea. Aldi carry approximately 1,500, 1,600 different lines. In other words, different products. So if you went into an Aldi, you would find roughly 1,500 to 1,600 different products on the shelves if you counted them all up. Coles and Woolworths carry around 20,000 to 25,000 different products, okay? And again, if you're familiar with both of those types of business, the Aldi and then I'm lumping Coles and Woolies in together because they run a similar kind of business model. That kind of makes sense to you, okay? You will understand that, I mean, the exact figures might be a surprise, but it would make sense to you that Aldi carry less of a range than the Woolies and the Coles. Now, the Coles and the Woolies strategy, okay, of the 20 to 25,000 different products, lines that Coles and Woolies carry, over half of their revenue, over half of the money they make is generated by far, far less than 1,000 of them, okay? So if you think about that, what that means is they have stores that are full of stock that barely moves, while a small percentage of the items constantly fly off the shelves and have to be replaced. Okay, sounds like a bit of a strange one. Why do they stock all this stuff that very few people buy? Now, most items, most of that, not the 1,000, the small amount, but most of the rest of the stuff are not bought by many people. But the people that do buy them, they're very important, okay? So for nearly all shoppers, the majority of the items in their shopping trolley are not actually from that top 1,000. But when you take a lot of customers, those top 1,000 will be in most trolleys. Hopefully this is kind of making some sense. So the idea being, if the supermarket carries all of the products that people like each individual person likes, the idea is they're going to attract the most customers. Because if somebody can go into that shop and buy all the things that they like, they're going to go there. Then, of course, they're also going to be buying that top 1,000 from that shop as well, because you're generally going to go and do your shopping in one place. So that's that strategy, okay? Now, the Aldi strategy is different, okay? They have a different approach to this. But to try to achieve basically the same end, which, of course, is to make the most amount of money. So they offer this much smaller range of what they might, you might call basics or essentials at a very, very low price. They have minimal product depth. If you think about it, if you go to an Aldi, there's often only one type of each product. In fact, very rarely is there more than one type of a product. Whereas, of course, if you go even cornflakes, there'd be different brands of cornflakes, stuff very similar. You're just going to have one brand in Aldi. A much smaller breadth, very much fewer options, different size options, color options, or whatever it might be. So much, much smaller range, much, much smaller breadth. And their take is that people are going to be attracted to their stores because of the super low prices they have for the bulk of products that most people need. So you can see there are two completely different approaches to, attracting customers into your supermarket. But look, both work. They're all very successful businesses. But just, it just shows different marketing strategies at play. The same type of business, trying to achieve the same end, but doing it through a completely different marketing strategy. All right, that's product dealt with. Okay, so you had a lot of notes under a lot of subheadings there. Now we're moving on to the second P, which is price. Now, obviously, price has a definition for you. I mean, it sounds silly, but sometimes it's the simplest words which are actually the most difficult to actually define. There's a definition for you, the amount a customer pays for a product. Examples of marketing decisions that are focused in this area, price setting strategies and tactics, discounts, payment terms. We're going to focus really on price setting strategies here. Okay, it's going to give you a few different ways in which you might determine the price. Now, the first thing I'm going to put out there is that the setting of the price of a product is not just a finance department decision. Okay, it's not just the accountants that come up with this. You certainly would be talking to them, but the price is largely a marketing decision, as hopefully you'll understand in a couple of minutes. Okay, now decisions on pricing all link back into the branding, the market position, the perception of quality on the part of the customers. All of that is under the marketing remit, obviously. At the end of the day, if the price is too high for the perceived quality that you're offering, customers are going to go somewhere else with lower prices. If the price is too low, it may actually not be possible to make a profit. You need to cover your costs of producing the product before you make a profit. This is probably where the accountants come in, because they would make sure that you're actually charging enough so that you're going to be able to make a profit. But also from a marketing point of view, if you're pricing your product too low, one of the issues that you can have is the issue of perception of poor quality. Even if the product is of really good quality, if you price it too low, people might just assume it's poor quality. Then it's really hard to kind of close that gap in the minds of consumers. So lots and lots of different things to think about when you are pricing. And like I said, there's a range of strategies. So we'll put 4 or 5 of them out here that you can use to set the price. And again, when you do your marketing report, you get into the pricing section, you're going to need to choose 1 or 2 of these to kind of justify for the business that you've chosen for your project. So the first strategy, very simple one, cost plus pricing, we call this one. Okay, so all you do is work out the cost of producing 1 unit, and then you just simply add a percentage markup. Okay, really, really simple. So in other words, if you worked out that the cost to produce 1 unit, whatever you're selling, is $10, and you wanted to charge a 50% markup, then you would be charging the customer $15. Simple as that. Okay. So that markup then becomes what we call the profit margin. So you know that every item that you're selling, you're making a 50% profit. Okay. Makes some sense, pretty straightforward. Advantages of using this method is it's a really, really simple way to work out price, and the price can easily be adjusted if costs change. So as we're all aware at the moment, July 2022, the prices of everything is going up. So some businesses are having to increase their prices. They're adjusting for the increasing cost of the resources, basically. So if you know that your cost of your resources or the inputs going into your products have gone up by 10%, it's very easy to just increase your prices by 10% to reflect that and maintain then the same profit margin that you had before. Because if your costs are going up and you're leaving that 50% in place, if 50% is what you're playing with, then obviously you're going to be getting less profit. So the advantage here is it allows you to really simply just change the price if your costs increase. Disadvantage here, it actually pays no mind whatsoever to competitors' prices, which we'll get into kind of in a minute. So it's very well, you can work out that it costs you $10 to produce something, which means you're going to do 50% and $15. But if everybody else all your competitors are charging only $6 for something which is, perceived to have equal quality, well then why would people pay $15? So then obviously your trick is you need to find a way to produce it more cheaply, because it sounds like your competitors are producing more cheaply. That's what you need to do. So that's the issue with this one. Although it's very simple, it actually doesn't, take into account at all what other people are charging. And obviously that needs to be a factor when you're working out your pricing. With this one, so strategy number 2, competition pricing. Again, this is pretty straightforward. Okay, set a price based on your competitors' prices, either below them, the same, or above. And again, that's obviously got to be reflected in the perception of quality of your product compared to those competitors. So if you're offering a vastly superior product to any of your competitors, you could potentially get away with charging a higher price than all of your competitors. If what you're offering is the lowest quality offering on the market, that's not necessarily an issue. Okay, you can still make money doing that, but you would need to scale your prices back to reflect that. Okay, there's lots of people out there that are willing, they're focusing on price. So they don't mind if the quality is lower as long as the price reflects that. Okay, so just think about your pricing compared, where you sit, what's your market position, and where do you sit in the market, setting your prices kind of according to that. Okay, what is the value proposition of your offering as compared with your competitors? Simple as. Advantage, if you get this right, it's likely to lead to an increase in sales because customers are going to see that value proposition and buy into it. Pretty straightforward. The disadvantage, now this is kind of like, flipping strategy 1, cost plus pricing around. This one doesn't take into account your production costs. So do you have the ability to compete in that area? So in other words, okay, because you might have a really good competitor who has a slightly better offering than you, and they're, say, $15 per unit. You go, okay, I can't charge the same as them because what we're offering is not as good, but $12 seems to be about right. But if $12 does not cover your costs of production, then going in at that level, you're going to be making a loss. So again, the reality is, I guess what we're saying is here, you kind of need to be thinking about not just these strategies in isolation, but kind of a combination of them. This is the main learning. A very specific strategy that businesses use, penetration pricing. Okay, this is where you intentionally set a lower than market price when you enter the market, so you come in low. Okay, most often used by companies entering new markets to quickly gain market share in an existing industry. So in other words, if you're a new player in a market which already has lots of people playing in that market and they're known, if you're a new player, why would people buy from you? There's lots of existing businesses they may have bought from before, probably trusted, reliable. And then suddenly you're the new kid on the block. Why would people buy from you? Well, if you can come up with a clever marketing campaign that kind of convince customers that your product is, of equal standing, and then you come in and undercut all those competitors, it's a really good way sometimes of stealing market share real quick from those businesses that are already operating in that market. So hopefully that makes sense. Penetration pricing, penetrating the market, coming in, real aggressively with your pricing to steal customers away from those existing businesses. So the advantage of this clearly allows quick penetration of existing market and to gain quick market share, which, provides quick revenues for you. Because if you didn't do this, it might take longer to gain traction in the market, longer for customers to trust you, longer to build up your sales. So this is a way of kind of doing it more quickly. Disadvantage, of course, if you think about it, this means lower profits, potentially even a loss for a period of time. So some businesses actually do this knowing that they're going to make a loss in that initial period. But they do that knowing that this is going to lead to market share. And when they adjust the price back up at some point in the future, they've got those customers then, hopefully, even though they're going to be charging more, they're hoping they're still going to retain most of those customers, and that's when they can start turning this into a profit. The other issue you might have, you need to be careful of, and this would be kind of where your promotion comes into play. The issue of a low price kind of being associated with low quality. Okay, that might not be the case here, and you need to make sure that your customers are convinced that the low price does not just reflect low quality. But again, that would be through the promotion, which we look at shortly. Price skimming. This is kind of the opposite of penetration pricing. Okay, here you set an initially high price and then you reduce that over a period of time. So the high price is set before other competitors come into the market. So this is a different scenario. With the last one, with penetration pricing, you're using that if you're a new player in an existing market to get that traction quickly. With this one, you do this if you have a new product, or not necessarily completely new, but a development of a product or something that your competitors are not yet selling. So you kind of got something unique over and above your competitors. So what you can sometimes do here is set a high price initially before you have that real strong competition and maybe your competitors catch up with you. Often used for the launch of a product that faces little or no competition. Yeah. Often this is in the technology space. Some products are often bought by what we call early adopters. Now, early adopters is a term often used by tech people that like to always have the latest version of technology. If they're an Apple fanboy, it could be always having the new version of the iPhone or the MacBook or whatever it might be. Could be the same with Android. But these people are willing to pay a higher price to have the latest or the best product on the market straight away. Okay, so this is a way of kind of exploiting that fact, I guess. So an advantage, it can be used to recover your excessive development costs and setup costs really, really quickly, and also producing a high profit margin early on, which in business is not possible to do. A lot of businesses run at a loss initially, and it takes a while to get to profitability. This is a way of kind of reversing that. Disadvantage here, I guess, look, you need to make sure that the perception of quality kind of matches the high price that you want to charge. Okay, this is not going to work if your customer base deems this to be kind of some kind of crap quality product. You're not going to get away with skimming the market in that situation. So you've got to focus on the quality of the product, quality of the offering for that one to work. Look at an example of this, the Sony PlayStation 3. It was initially sold $600. This is in US, but fairly soon after, once all those early adopters and people that, weighing, I guess, they probably all had the PlayStation 1 or 2. The 3 was advertised as coming out. Everyone wanted to jump on the bandwagon. So they knock it out at $600 to begin with. But then fairly soon after, once all those early adopters had kind of bought them all up, they then reduced the price straight back down to $200. And then they sold the rest of them for that price. So, and I guess until probably the PlayStation 4 came out, which then the pricing changed. Think about price skimming. Apple also uses strategy with the iPhone. If you think about it, when a new iPhone is released, generally you can buy the kind of existing models for much cheaper, and they've only been out for a year or two. So, at this point, I think we're about due for an iPhone 14, probably in about 2 months' time. Bearing in mind this is July 2022. The iPhone 11, I bought mine 3 years ago. I can't remember how much it was, but you could now buy an iPhone 11, which is only a 3-year-old product, for much, much less than what it would have been sold for initially. So it's another sort of similar way. You're skimming on the top of the market when you're releasing a new model, and then all the other models behind it kind of come down in price. And then that cycle kind of repeats itself. So think about, that kind of a strategy there. Next strategy, actually I should say strategy 5, I think, but check with your notes. Psychological pricing, a very, very straightforward one. You look at that, that's very obvious to you. You charge $99 instead of $100 or $99.99, whatever it might be. The idea being that the 99 psychologically seems a lot cheaper than 100, even though you know that really isn't. The mind just works that way. That's why you very rarely see stuff for, $100, $1,000, so on and so forth. And this one you would clearly kind of use in conjunction with one of the other strategies or one or more of the other strategies. So this is just once you've kind of got the figure you want to be at, if you figure out that 200 is where you need to be, go for 199. Okay, so there's some pricing strategies for you. Moving on to the third of our P's, place. So product, price, place. What we mean by place is how the customer accesses your product, your service. Okay, so the decisions here around distribution, franchising, maybe location decisions, and anything to do with transport, warehousing, logistics. Okay, so decisions around that kind of fall under place. So what you're trying to think of, what you're trying to work out here is how are your customers going to access your products? Okay, at the end of the day, they're going to want to access them when it suits them. Now, what this boils down to is there's a range of different distribution channels that we can use, which involves intermediaries. So I'm just kind of giving you some language here. So the intermediaries, kind of this middle stage that gets a product from the manufacturer to the customer. Wholesalers, businesses that buy huge quantities from a manufacturer and then sells smaller but still substantial quantities to the retailer. And then the retailer, which is the business that sells to us. Okay, so if we kind of that might make a bit more sense to you in a minute when we kind of put that into some diagrams. But basically, we can look at three types of distribution channels. Okay, there's three fundamental types. There's kind of other little anomalies around this, but fundamentally, there's three different distribution channels that you might consider. Okay, number one on the top there, the producer of the product selling direct to the consumer. Okay, no intermediaries, no wholesalers, just one step. Second one, selling through retailers. So you're producing your product, you then sell to the retailers, who then on-sell to the customers. And then the most complex one, which involves two stages in between the producer and the consumer, is when the producer sells to the wholesaler sells to the retailer, and then the retailer sells to the consumer. So that we know. And I guess the issue is, of course, the more steps are involved, the more people have got to make money. And, the profit is kind of cut more ways. But in some types of businesses, one or more of these might make more sense than in others. So you need to be aware for your particular type of business, which way you're going to do it. Are you going to try and sell direct to the consumer? Or are you going to go through these various stages? So let's look at each in turn and look at how they kind of play out. So number one, produce to consumer. So in other words, you're manufacturing your product, you're producing your product, and you're going to sell it direct to the end consumer. With this model, you have the most control of your distribution channel purely because there's nobody else involved, okay? So you have total control over your distribution. This is most common with service businesses. So, at the end of the day, a service business, the service cannot be stored for sale later on and redistributed by anyone else. So realistically, if your business is a service business, this is kind of your only option. Can be used by manufacturers, but you need to think, are they the best placed people to be selling direct to the customer? If you're producing a fantastic product, your expertise might be in the production of that product. But are you the best placed person to actually sell it to customers? Maybe not. So that's why you might actually either get, some of those intermediary stages, such as retailers involved, because their expertise is actually in selling products. Okay. Now, producer to retailer to, that should have been brought down to consumer. So that's that second stage we looked at before. So again, this is where the producer sells the products to a retailer and they then on-sell them to the consumer. Okay, you can see the diagram there, manufacturer, retailer, consumer. Now, what you're doing here, clearly you're relinquishing some control over your distribution channel because you're introducing this intermediary retailer. So they're going to be having some control over here. Very common with fresh food products with a short shelf life, okay? You can't be messing around with too many stages because once they're produced or picked or grown or whatever it is, then you know that you've got a limited time before they need to get to the consumer. So you don't tend to go the wholesale route so much with this. It's got to be quicker. The timescales are shorter. It needs to get to the consumer more quickly than one of the later system would allow. And then finally, your producer to wholesaler to retailer to consumer. So the 4 stages. So like I said before, this is where the producer sells in huge quantities to wholesalers. Wholesalers then sell in still large quantities to retailers, and then the retailers send them on. So again, it's just another stage kind of included. Now you're kind of relinquishing all of the control of your distribution channel because other businesses are involved and they're kind of taking care of all of that. Most common with consumer goods, clothing. So in other words, consumer goods basically stuff that we buy which doesn't have this short shelf life. This is kind of the way that most of the stuff that we buy gets to us via this kind of a chain. Okay. That's all you need to know with that one. 4th one, promotion. So the 4th of our 7 Ps. Now this is where, I said at the beginning, advertising is not marketing, marketing is not advertising. This is kind of where advertising fits in to marketing. Okay, so promotion refers to marketing communications. It's the part of the process that involves informing current and potential customers about your product. Could be its existence, its features, its benefits. Your promotion might focus on all of those, one of those, whatever it might be. Okay, some examples of marketing decisions given in there. So we're going to focus on a few different aspects of that. First off, promotion, typical objectives or goals of a promotional campaign. So when you are coming up with some kind of promotion campaign, or even in your mind at the moment, think advertising campaign, you've got a goal in mind, okay? And it can vary. It can vary from now to the kind of campaign you're going to have next year. So some examples of goals, you might be trying to create some kind of brand image. You might be trying to generate some brand loyalty. You might just be reminding customers of the existence of a current product. You might be introducing customers to a new product that you're putting out there. I think some advertising is focused on persuading people to buy your product as opposed to the competitor's product. Some advertising is focused on informing customers about the features and the benefits of a particular product. So you've got to think about it. Think about adverts that you see. What was the goal of that advert? And it might be a couple of those things, but it's probably not going to be all of those things. So when you're coming up with your promotional campaign, your advertising campaign, you need to think, what is it that I'm trying to achieve through this promotional campaign? Just do it, okay? Immediately you saw that, you came up with Nike, every single one of you. And it's just 3 words in the English language. This is generally regarded as one of the most successful ad examples in the history of business, okay? Pre-1990, Nike was a brand that was aimed predominantly at marathon runners, long-distance runners. Then in the late 80s, the fitness craze emerged. That was kind of a new, society's attitudes and trends, all of that. This was a new trend that emerged really in the late 80s. Nike, the marketers realized that they needed to capitalize on this, okay? If they ignored this and just kept focusing on their existing market of long-distance runners, they were missing out on a huge part of the market, okay? And it was their main competitor, Reebok, who was selling many, many more shoes than Nike at that time. Reebok were much, much more successful than Nike. So then in the late 80s, someone came up with this Nike campaign, Just Do It. It was a hit. So Nike sales in 1988, $800 million. In 1998, they were over $9 billion. That is astonishing growth. And they put that in large part, number one, to responding to changing society's needs and trends and custom demand, all of that, but down to this advertising campaign, it just became so ingrained in people's minds as it is today, all of these years later. You need to think about your promotional strategies. Okay, so once you've decided on your objective, what we just talked about before, is it on that list, reminding people of an existing product? Are we getting the idea of a new product, features, whatever it might be? So once you've decided on your objective, then it's time to decide on which marketing strategies you're going to use. So there's a whole bunch, and we're just going to focus on 5 of them. This kind of covers most of your options. There are others, but again, we're simplifying things down here. So promotional strategies, we'll look at these 5, okay? So number 1, advertising. And this is what I'm saying about marketing and advertising, not the same thing. Everything we're talking about, this entire outcome, is marketing. And here I'm talking about advertising for the first time. And this is just one promotion strategy amongst a list, amongst the 7 Ps. Advertising is kind of buried right within this idea of marketing, which is why those 2 terms are not interchangeable. So the idea of advertising, you're creating a message you want to get across to existing and or potential customers using a range of platforms: TV, radio, newspapers, magazines, social media, whatever it might be. Now, the advantages of this type of promotion, it can be used to target either a very, very wide audience or a much smaller niche target market. So you can tweak this depending on what it is you're trying to sell and who that target market is, okay? Disadvantages of advertising: it can be really, really expensive to promote this way. And if the message that you're trying to convey doesn't get through, in other words, your advertising campaign is not a success, it can be a massive waste of a lot of money. So let's look at a few of the different mediums within advertising. So TV advertising, very, very expensive, will be no surprise to you, but can obviously have a really, really high impact. Okay, now you may be aware of this, but the cost of TV advertising varies according to the viewing audience. Okay, that's why the TV stations, 7, 9, 10, are always looking for the next big show, The Block, My Kitchen Rules, MasterChef, whatever it might be. Okay, the higher the audience is that they can generate and attract for those shows, or any show, the more advertising revenue they can generate. And there's a table there, Channel 7 advertising cost, just gives you a bit of an example. These are fairly recent figures, I believe, just to give you a bit of an idea of how much they would be charging. And clearly you can see prime time is when those slots are the most expensive, and daytime advertising is actually really quite cheap. Now, bear in mind, that's just the cost of buying the slot. That's not the cost of producing the ad, which obviously that can be millions of dollars just on its own. So that's just to, each slot that you want to show it. So there's some examples, just to give you kind of ballpark figures. The most expensive ad slot that I could find ever shown was a 30-second slot during the Super Bowl in the US. They were selling 30-second slots in the Super Bowl for upwards of 5.6 million US, which would be 7 million Australian, something like that now. Even more, I'm not even sure, something like that. That's because around 100 million people in the US watch the Super Bowl final. So, you're getting your advert out to a huge number of people. And obviously that's what it's all about. The more people that are going to potentially see your advert, the more expensive it becomes, which explains that table as well. Radio advertising. This is very useful for certain types of products. You have a really wide reach, but also an ability to target quite specific segments here, based on, age, music styles, areas of interest. If you think about it, there's radio stations which appeal to different demographics. So it allows you to maybe target your advertising. The TV, it's everyone sees, but now when you get to radio, there's kind of more specific advertising you could do depending on which station you choose to advertise on. Then there's also the point that radios are often on in the background at work, or while people are studying, while people are driving. That's a really, really big one. So you kind of you're kind of getting hold of a kind of almost a captive audience. So even people that are not intending to hear your adverts can often hear them. And the great thing with radio as well is the repetition effect. So bear with me here.
So many taxis, why wait? 131-008, silver top taxis, why wait? 131-008, so many taxis, why wait? 131-008.
Okay, that's enough there. Look, the whole point of me playing that was, look, that's that 131-008. I have never rang that number in my life. But, you know, I listen to the radio in the car, and I don't even know if it's recent. It might have been years since I've heard that jingle, but that was a very, very common jingle to hear in a bunch of radio stations. 131-008, that number is just absolutely cemented in my mind. If I ever needed a taxi, and obviously these days you can use Uber, but if I forgot that Uber existed, I would know I can ring 131-008. Because I've just heard that so many times, and yet I've never, ever dialed that number. And you think a lot of the jingles that you hear on radio work in the same way. You know, they're catchy, stuck in your mind, never going to forget them. And you just hear them again and again and again. Okay, social media advertising. So again, a different medium here now. Look, I'm not even going to talk about the you can fill in the blanks. This is one obviously targeted more to you than I am, so you shall understand this. But the power of social media, if your market is you people, then you'd be kind of crazy to be overlooking social media advertising. Right, promotion strategy number 2, direct marketing. Selling straight to the public using things such as mail outs, telemarketing, door-to-door sales. This is probably a dying thing, not used as much as it once was. Look, an advantage of this is if it uses face-to-face communication, such as door-to-door sales, there's kind of a chance to build relationships quickly and generate customer loyalty just by, you know, using the interaction with human beings. This can also be a relatively cheap strategy depending on how you apply it. Disadvantages, look, in today's world, this type of marketing is kind of perceived as being quite invasive in people's lives, people's privacy, and not even socially responsible in many respects. Okay. You know, this idea of, you know, spamming people, you know, these calls that we can sometimes get incessantly on our mobiles, you know, just people trying to sell you stuff. This is a much less commonly used strategy by legitimate business. Trust the dodgy people out there use this one, but legitimate businesses are probably moving away from this. It's also harder to reach a wide audience quickly, where if you think about social media and stuff, this kind of thing is now kind of overtaking because it's much easier using social media to reach a lot of people very, very quickly. Personal selling. Sales rep meeting with the potential customer and selling direct face-to-face. This is still needs to be used when you've got a complex product or there is a high price, cars, that sort of thing. Look, advantages here, a good salesperson can be really persuasive, have a really good sales record. You know, you've heard this idea of selling ice to Eskimos. You know, if they're able to read the customer, come up with solutions and meet their needs, they can get a sale when other people might not be able to. So that can be pretty successful. Disadvantages, good salespeople can be quite expensive. You need to do training. And again, because we're talking one-on-one, you know, you spend a lot of time with an individual person, so it's really hard to reach a wide audience quickly doing this type of a method. Sales promotion, giving customers short-term incentives to either buy or trial the product. Strategies such as price reductions, bog-offs, buy one, get one free, free samples, that kind of thing. Look, can increase sales in the short term. Also fairly easy to monitor the effectiveness of using such strategy. You know, you suddenly do a bog-off and your sales go through the roof. You could probably say that was because of the bog-off. Disadvantages, long-term increase in sales might not be so good. because people are just exploiting the fact that they're buying one getting one free, or they're using a price reduction. But when you put things back to normal levels, people stop buying, and also competitors can quickly jump in and offer similar or better deals. So that might be quite a short-lived strategy in terms of how successful it is as well. Promotion number 5, public relations. We talk about that in a bit more detail at the end of the outcome. The last 1 or 2 key knowledge dot points focus on public relations. But for now, the practice of managing and disseminating information to the public in order to affect public perception about the business. So this is all about public relations is more about creating positivity around your business in the minds of the community. So people perceiving the business in a positive light. Okay, that's what public relations really is. Okay, advantages here. It can be low cost, as most forms of this are actually free, as we'll discover when we talk about it. And it also allows you to build a positive brand image, which is always going to be key to long-term sales and then ultimately business success. Okay, but it's good because a lot of this is kind of free. Disadvantages, there's always the risk of negative publicity and controlling that if it happens. And I would say that's even more of an issue in the days of electronic media, social media, because, a bad news story now can kind of travel real quick. In the same way a good news story can. But in terms of the media tend to prefer a bad news story to a good one, and that will tend to go viral much more quickly. So you need to kind of manage this whole PR aspect of the business much more closely now, even more than you used to have to do. Okay, moving on to the 5th of the 7 P's. Now, these final 3 are much quicker, particularly the last couple. So we're not going into as much detail with these ones as we were with the first 4, so don't worry. We're well over halfway here. We're not too far from the end. So people, what we're talking about here is your employees fundamentally. When we're talking about people, we're talking about employees. We talk about the employees that interact with customers, and they're the ones that are representing the business's values to the public, and also in a large way contribute to the reputation of the business. It can also refer to the customers as well, basically any people that are kind of involved, but really we're focusing more on employees here. So examples of marketing decisions here, you can see a little list sort of stuff that we might be thinking about. That's it, done. People, owners and managers. Okay, that's key people within a business. Okay, if we go back actually one bit here, the employees. Now, obviously, owners and managers are kind of a subset. I mean, managers are still employees. They're just employees that have responsibility for running parts of the business, or maybe the business as a whole. So this is kind of very similar. So owners and managers are responsible for everything that happens within a business, clearly. And therefore they have an obvious impact on the products offered. They have an obvious impact on the culture within the business. And all of that stuff obviously impacts customer satisfaction. So if you're selling a great product at a good price, customer satisfaction increases. If you've got a really strong culture in the business and everyone's happy and your dealings with your customers are positive and happy, customer satisfaction increases. Okay, so the key here is the employees are the people actually delivering that experience. Okay, so the employees are hired and trained by the owners and managers. So again, the owners and managers need to make sure they're getting the hiring right and the training right. Okay, because all of this leads down to the interaction that everybody, employees, managers, owners, whoever's having those interactions with your customers, that's really what, a large part of the reputation of a business is built on. Often the reputation of a business doesn't sit even so much with the quality of the product. It can really sit with people's experiences of dealing with the people within the business. Okay. And a lot of the perceptions that people have about a business are based on those interactions that they have with the employees, at least as well as, if not more than, sometimes the products. I mean, particularly if you're in a service business, obviously that becomes even more important. So just, really, really important things to be thinking about from a marketing perspective. Now, customers, I said really the focus is on employees, but customers are still also a key part of people because they can then become marketers for you. Okay. If your customers have had positive experiences with you, they can tell friends, family, connections. And then what that leads to is basically word of mouth advertising. Word of mouth advertising is pretty much the best you can get because number one, it's free. Okay. It's not costing you a penny to do. And it's also more powerful because there's much more power. If I've got friends, family, people I trust, people I know, I trust their judgment, trust their opinion. If they're telling me that this particular business, the service, the product, whatever it is great, I'm more likely to believe that than any advertising campaign that business can come up with. Okay. There's some real convincing advertising campaigns, but I'm going to believe my friends, family, people I trust, people I know, people whose opinions I value more than an advertising campaign. And like I say, the best thing is that's free. So that's where customers fit into this whole people part of the 7Ps model. Sixth one, process. This is all about the purchasing experience. Okay, so again, the experience can be just as important in the minds of the customers as the product itself. And this is an area that's often overlooked by businesses. Okay, so it's often an area that businesses can actually use to differentiate themselves from their competitors, particularly if what they're selling, the actual product they're selling to market, is perceived to be very similar. Then one way you can actually differentiate yourselves from those competitors is to actually offer a different, higher quality, but different in some way, purchasing experience. Okay. Strategies that businesses might consider to improve the purchasing experience. First off, friendly, engaging, knowledgeable staff. Look, this kind of seems obvious, but you know what? So many businesses out there, and I've experienced hundreds, not thousands of my time, don't seem to focus on this. Your staff are an absolute asset to your business, or they should be. Okay, these are the people that are engaging with your customers, helping them make decisions about the products, helping the customers. They should be an asset. But if it doesn't work well, it can actually have the opposite impact. So, number one strategy, friendly, engaging, and knowledgeable staff. Then you can think about purchasing options. Now, this became a real thing in COVID, much more of a thing. So what I'm talking about is here purchasing options such as going in store, having stuff delivered, click and collect, which kind of became big, obviously, during COVID. But still, businesses still do click and collect now because customers kind of got used to that and they like that way of buying. And then also different payment options, cash, credit card, FPOS, Afterpay, obviously the new biggie now. So this is what we're talking about when we're talking about different purchasing experiences. Offering a different range to your customers is wise. A lot of people now have got used to online shopping. Obviously, you can't overlook online shopping. But a lot of people, once COVID ended, kind of the lockdowns ended, I guess, couldn't wait to get back in store. So again, businesses that didn't have an in-store, physical bricks and mortar presence were kind of at a disadvantage. So when you're thinking about marketing your product, and again, this comes back to your marketing report, your SAC report, you come up, what's the best way that you can give your customers the best access to appeal to a wide range of customers as possible. Great customer service. Look, it links to number one that we just talked about, but taking this further, fast, responsive communication with customers, particularly if there's a problem. And this is where a lot of businesses fall down, okay? If there's an issue, if you've got customer complaints, any kind of negativity, don't just put your head in your sand and just ignore it, pretend it will go away, because it generally won't. Deal with it quickly, okay? One of the things I loved about working in business, probably the most, was actually when I had a customer complaint, because I loved being able to take that person who was, kind of pissed off with you, pissed off with the business, had a real issue, and then having the opportunity to do something, to solve their problem, to put things right in such a way that often that person would go away a happier customer than if nothing had happened negative in the first place, because they appreciate the fact that, something happened and you went above and beyond, you went out of your way, and you've actually turned it into an even more positive experience than what it might have been. And I was actually it's one of my favorite things about working in business. I used to love dealing with, a real tricky customer, because it then became a challenge to me to get that customer to walk out happier than they might even have been if nothing had gone wrong. Not a lot of businesses seem to focus on that, to be fair, but those that do, onto a real winner. Provision of information. So customers should have access to all relevant information about the product and or business so they can make informed decision. A website is one way that a lot of businesses do that, obviously, these days. It's kind of a no-brainer. Seventh and final one, physical evidence, okay? The 7th P. What we're talking about here is the environment or the space in which the service occurs. This is more about a service, but it can be a retail space. But basically, the physical space in which you as a business interact with your customers. So the physical equipment, the physical layout, the physical environment, the resources, all of that sort of stuff. So examples of marketing decisions around your facilities, what kind of furniture you're going to use. Again, think about a service business. The kind of furniture is going to portray a certain type of an image. The spatial layout, is it going to be functional? How efficient is it? Signage, all of the stuff that you see there, if you think about it, are going to portray something about the business. And again, this stuff can be really, really important. Okay. Ambient conditions, noise, air, temperature, noise. Like I'm going to go back to my McDonald's days many, many years ago. We played CDs throughout the day. We couldn't play any CD. Obviously, we had to be licensed to play that particular music for a start. But also, we'd had psychologists had designed the music for any particular part of day. And it was kind of around the tempo of the music. So in quiet parts of the day, the music tend to be a bit more chilled out, and it wouldn't kind of encourage the customers to be in a hurry. But then at peak times, when you had a high number of customers and you wanted people to basically eat and then go to make space, then the music kind of was designed to not make people feel super rushed, but that they wouldn't want to hang around chatting once they'd finished eating, and they'd kind of move on, and then you could get the next customers in. Hopefully that kind of makes some sense. But, the music is designed in a retail store, particularly in these big chains. They've got the resources behind them. The music you're hearing is not an accident. Okay, it's designed often with a specific purpose in mind. The air. Look, an example of this is I've never seen this happen, I don't think, in Australia, but in the UK now for a number of years. If you imagine a shopping mall, a shopping centre like Greensborough Plaza, for example, where there is a supermarket within the shopping centre. The main supermarket, Coles, Woolies, they obviously tend to have in-house bakeries now, or there would be a venting system running from the bakery into the car park of the shopping centre. So as soon as people get out of their cars, they smell that, that smell of baked bread, which, everyone loves. It's also a trick for selling houses. A real estate agent will tell you, if you're having an open house, it's a really good idea to have baked some bread or some biscuits or something beforehand. So when people come through your house, they smell this, and it's easier to make the association. It could be my home. Power of smell is very, very powerful. So that's like an extreme form of marketing, venting your baked bread smell from your bakery into a car park. But, it's all part of the game, Digital and online presence is obviously a huge thing. That's now kind of become part of the physical evidence equation. So this idea that having a website, that's now kind of seen as part of the space in which you do business. So that's kind of included. So examples, the look of the store. I've actually talked about this in class with my class, the Aldi stores, they changed. So you can see the left-hand image you see there was one of the original stores. About 3 or 4 years ago, they went through a massive rebranding and changed them to what you see on the right. There's a couple of changes they made. Look, they increased the quality of the fixtures and fittings, and like the storage of the vegetables and stuff is a bit neater. That's part of it. And they put in some decent quality freezers. But two key things they did here was they changed the color of the tiles on the floor. From that kind of light cream color to this dark charcoal color. And the lighting, rather than being harsh white lights overhead, they changed to a kind of softer yellow hue. And that combination of the darker flooring and the slightly softer lighting completely changed the feel of the store just in and of itself. And it just gave the impression of a more quality experience. And that's what Audi are trying to do. Everybody knows they're cheap, but what they've got to do is overcome the perception that they're poor quality. So if they can do something as simple as changing the color of the floor, changing the light bulbs to change people's perception and make it feel like a more quality experience, well, what a great strategy. And they did that, and it really, really worked for them. And it's really helped Audi kind of lift the perception of them in the minds of consumers in terms of the quality experience. And very, very simple. Sounds and Sense, Macca's Playlist, Supermarket Bakers, Pumpkin Smells, giving you that example. Online review websites. So you've got to think about this now, particularly if you're in kind of any business really, but particularly in hospitality, hotels, pubs, restaurants. You've got TripAdvisor and all these different review websites. That's now part of the physical space in which you're playing, and you need to be aware that reviews are being written all the time. Look, it's worth being across the reviews that are written about your business, and a lot of bigger businesses now employ people purely just to respond. Social media managers, you can look those up on Seek, people just managing the social media, and often they'll spend their day just responding to reviews, whether they're negative or positive, on social media to negate any negativity that can kind of come around from negative reviews, which is a huge thing. That is it. Okay, so that was a long video, guys. I promise you the rest will be nowhere near as long as that. Probably one of the longest videos in the entire 2-year course. But look, that was the marketing mix, the 7 Ps. Make sure you've got a really good organized set of notes. Like I said, lots of subheadings so you can kind of pick your way through all that stuff nice and easily. I'll see you in the next video. Cheers for now.